Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the podcast, and welcome to your Monday Night Raw post show, man. And there is a lot to talk about in today's episode. We hear from the tribal chief himself, Roman Reigns. We also got Javon Evans in action taking on Ethan Page. We'll talk about that in today's episode as well. We also hear from the Judgment Day. We'll talk about that as well in today's episode. Got Sol Ruca in action taking on Roxanne Perez. We also hear from Oba Femi. We'll talk about that in today's show as well. We got Braun Breaker in action taking on Joe Hendry. We also hear from newly crowned Intercontinental Champion Chad Gable. We'll talk about that in today's episode as well. And we also have a highly anticipated street fight between Jacob Fatu and Royce Keys in the main event of Monday Night Raw, man. But let's start off the night and kicking off Monday Night Raw. We hear from the tribal chief, Roman Reigns. Roman comes out to the ring, asks the crowds to acknowledge him. Roman says he's a man of his word, and he called his shot and delivered. Roman says he won the Rumble and saved this place. Roman then talks about beating Rollins at SummerSlam. Roman says maybe after SummerSlam, him and Rollins found peace, finally. After that, Roman is interrupted by LA Knight. LA Knight comes out to the ring, gives Roman congrats for his match at SummerSlam. Knight says he gives congrats to Roman for doing the match on his own without the bloodline. But Knight calls Roman a fraud. Knight says that he wants the World Heavyweight title. Knight says he wants a match with Roman without any bullshit from the bloodline. Roman says, fraud? Who the hell are you talking about? Roman then mocks Knight. Roman asks Knight, what have you done? Roman says you don't get a number one contendership around here with bitching and moaning, and tells Knight to get in the back of the line. After that, Knight says he's earned his title shot. He's the uncrowned champion. Knight says that Roman has shielded himself away from people like LA Knight. Knight then mocks Roman with the Shield chant. Knight says that Roman is not on his level, and that Knight is lightning in a bottle. Knight then tells Roman to grow a pair so he can smack him back to factory settings. Couple things about this, and we'll talk more about this at the end of today's show. I thought this back and forth banner here between LA Knight and Roman Reigns was absolutely incredible. The fact that we've seen Roman have that incredible match at SummerSlam, pretty much closing the chapter of what was a 14-year partnership or friendship with Seth Rollins, come to an end at SummerSlam. We see LA Knight. LA Knight has been tied to the hips of the Usos and the Bloodline for, it seems like forever at this point, and I've been very crucial with LA Knight being involved with the Bloodline. I made it abundantly clear that I think LA Knight, without the Bloodline, he will not be on television. Now LA Knight, kind of calls a shot. Now LA Knight wants to be the World Heavyweight Champion. He feels like he is the uncrowned champion and feels as if that he's been robbed his opportunity at the World Heavyweight title. Now LA Knight, like I said, calls a shot for the World Heavyweight Championship against Roman Reigns. Now, again, when this match takes place, who knows? Could happen in a couple weeks. Or it could possibly happen at Money in the Bank in October in New Orleans. But like I said, we'll talk more about this and how I feel about this at the end of today's episode. But moving on from that, we go into our first official match kicking off Monday Night Raw last night. It is Javon Evans taking on Ethan Page. Now, I thought this was a good match. It was a back-and-forth matchup between Evans and Page, with Evans hitting a springboard Hurricane Rana, taking out Page. Evans was trying to keep the pace of the match, but Page hits a big boot, sending Evans to the outside. Evans then gets up, hits a springboard lariat, taking out Page in the middle of the ring. Page then gets up, sends Evans into the announce table. Evans then sends Page into the ring post on the outside. Evans then hits a Pele kick for a near fall. Page then hits a confidence breaker on Evans for a near fall. But then Evans then jumps over Page and the referee, jumps off the top rope, hits an OG cutter, taking out Page, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is Javon Evans. After the match, you can see Javon Evans still standing in the middle of the ring, but behind Javon Evans was none other than the return of Big Cass. Big Cass was behind Javon Evans. He hits a big boot on Evans, and then Big Cass hits an East River crossing on Evans, leaving Evans helpless in the middle of the ring. Some interesting stuff there from Big Cass. Moving on from that, we hear from the Judgment Day. Liv Morgan, Roxanne Perez, and Raquel Rodriguez come out to the ring. Liv grabs a microphone and says she is the greatest women's champion of all time. Liv then talks about beating Io Sky at SummerSlam. She also says that Io was the only person that had the guts to challenge her. Liv says there is nobody else to challenge her for the Women's World title. Liv then hypes up Raquel Rodriguez, and Liv says that Roxanne is going to embarrass Sol Ruca. And speaking of Sol Ruca, we get an impromptu matchup between Sol Ruca and Roxanne Perez. Now, I thought this was a decent match. It was a back-and-forth matchup between Ruca and Perez, with Roxanne keeping the pace of the match. Ruca hits a moonsault to the outside, taking out Roxanne. Roxanne and then Ruca both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Sol hitting a release German suplex on Perez. Ruca then follows it up by hitting a Shining Wizard in the middle of the ring for a near fall, followed by an X-Factor. Liv, who was ringside, attacks Sol Ruca, but the match ends in a disqualification due to the referee spotting Liv attacking Sol. The Judgment Day then get in the ring. They attack Sol Ruca, but out of nowhere we hear Becky Lynch's music. Becky Lynch is here. She comes down to the ring, grabs a microphone, and says the man has come around. Becky says she's not here for the Intercontinental title. She made that title already, but instead she's here for the Women's World title. Becky says that she's seen Liv parade around here becoming a glorified valet. Becky says that the women's champion should be fighting, not flirting. Becky says that Liv has the worst title reign of all time. And it's not her just saying that, everyone's been saying that. Becky says unfortunately things are going to get a lot worse for Liv Morgan. Liv then tells Becky that she's jealous. Becky then tells Liv that she's not even the best champion in her own group. Becky says, hell, you're not even the best women's world champion that slept with Dominic Mysterio. After that, the Judgment Day make their way up the ramp, but they're interrupted by the return of Stephanie Vaquer. Vaquer attacks Roxanne and Raquel. Liv then spots Stephanie, but she tries to run away from Stephanie, but Stephanie catches up to Liv. She attacks Liv Morgan, and then we have Becky Lynch and Stephanie Vaquer face-to-face in the middle of the ring. Looks like Liv Morgan now has some challengers for that Women's World title. We'll talk more about that at the end of today's show. Moving on from that, we hear from Oba Femi. Oba comes out to the ring, says words cannot describe at what happened at SummerSlam Night 1. Oba says him and Lesnar have a new respect for each other. Oba says that Lesnar had to come back to see if he picked the right guy. Oba then talks about SummerSlam. He says he passed the test and the beast can finally rest. Oba says now that he will lead the new generation, but he sends a chilling warning to the locker room. After that, Oba makes his way up to the ramp, but he's interrupted by the Vision and Braun Breaker. Oba and Breaker have a stare down at the ramp face to face. And it looks like we might get a matchup here between Breaker and Oba Femi, two guys that are going to be the future of this business for the next 10, 15 years. We'll talk more about this at the end of today's show. And speaking of Braun Breaker, we got a matchup here between Breaker taking on Joe Hendry. This was a glorified squash match, with Breaker keeping the pace of the match. Joe Hendry ends up attacking Austin Theory, who was ringside. Breaker capitalizes on this by hitting a spear on Joe Hendry in the middle of the ring, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is Braun Breaker. Breaker ends up leaving the ring looking disgusted. Theory then attacks Hendry, but Tozawa is here, and Tozawa attacks Austin Theory. Moving on from that, we hear from newly crowned Intercontinental Champion Chad Gable. Chad Gable comes out to the ring. He talks about SummerSlam, but he also says that there's a few people that he wants to thank, most notably Penta. Gable calling Penta the best luchador in the business. Gable thanks the fans for sticking with him for the past 10 years. Gable also mentions Shorty G. Gable says, when you make a promise, you bust your ass to get to that promise. After that, Gable's interrupted by former Intercontinental Champion Penta. Penta comes out to the ring, grabs a microphone, and says, you deserve this title. Penta says, last night we stole the show. Penta also says that he gave Gable his flowers and gave Gable his respect. Penta tells Gable that he is a true luchador and one of the best wrestlers in the world. After that, Penta and Gable are interrupted by Dominic Mysterio and JD McDonough. Mysterio mocks Gable. Mysterio says that he is a AAA Mega Champion and the greatest Mysterio of all time. JD then mocks the crowd. JD says that Gable lost the right to call himself a luchador. And then Dominic Mysterio says Gable is keeping the title warm for him and the Judgment Day. And moving on from that, we got an impromptu matchup here between Chad Gable teaming up with Penta to take on Dominic Mysterio and JD McDonough. I thought it was a good match. It was a back-and-forth matchup between both teams with Gable Gable and Penta keeping the pace. Gable hits an angle slam for a near fall, followed by a diving headbutt. Penta then gets involved in the match by hitting a Hurricane Rana and a Penta driver for a near fall. Gable then applies an ankle lock, but the hold is broken. Penta hits a Mexican destroyer on the outside. Mysterio then has the ring bell hammer. Mysterio then goes for a 619, but Gable counters the 619. Penta then hits Dominic with the title. Gable then hits a German suplex into a roll-up, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are Chad Gable and Penta. Hats off to Penta and Chad Gable for getting the win in this matchup. And moving on from that, in our main event, we got a street fight between Jacob Fatu, the Samoan Werewolf, taking on Royce Keys. Now, I thought this was a good match. It was a back-and-forth matchup between Fatu and Keys, with Royce and Jacob both exchanging in the middle of the ring. Fatu was keeping the pace of the match, with Fatu sending Royce into the post. Royce then gets up, sends Fatu through the barricade. Royce then hits Fatu with a kendo stick, followed by Fatu hitting Royce with a kendo stick. Royce then hits a suplex, sending Fatu onto a chair structure for a near fall. Fatu then gets up, hits an impaler DDT for a near fall. Royce then throws a chair at Fatu off the top rope. Royce then hits a power slam for a near fall, but Fatu gets up, hits a super kick. Royce hits a spine buster, but Fatu then gets up, hits a pump-up Samoan drop, sending Royce into a table in the corner. Fatu then follows it up by hitting a moonsault and applying a Tonga death grip on Royce. Referee sounds for the bell, and your winner of the match is Jacob Fatu. After the match, Fatu hits multiple hip attacks on Royce. Royce is now bleeding from the mouth. Adam Pearce is here telling Fatu that's enough, but Fatu hits more hip attacks, with Royce being stuck headfirst into a chair. Roman is here, and it looks like Roman approves what Fatu did to Royce Keys. A couple of things I want to talk about, man, as far as Monday Night Raw is concerned before I get the hell up out of here. Number one, I thought this honestly was a solid Monday Night Raw from top to bottom. Starting off, I want to start with the top of the show. I want to talk about LA Knight. I know that's a hot topic and, you know, the big elephant in the room right now with LA Knight. Look, there's a lot of LA Knight fans out there, and I'm one of them. I'm not sitting here saying I'm a diehard fan of LA Knight. There's a lot of diehard fans out there for LA Knight that are waiting for his just due. My thing with LA Knight is this. Do I think LA Knight's a star? Absolutely. I think there's a couple issues, though, with LA Knight as far as the backstage politics that goes on backstage within WWE. I think there's multiple reasons why they have not crowned LA Knight world champion. Now, with that being said, would I like to see a program between Roman Reigns and LA Knight? Yeah, absolutely. And for what it's worth, I wouldn't mind seeing LA Knight being world champion, even if it was for a month. Now, some people may disagree with that. Well, what does that really do for LA Knight? To me, this is something where it's a tip of the cap for LA Knight, even if it's a month title reign where he can actually say he became world champion in WWE. Now, I'm not sitting here and going on a limb and saying that LA Knight is close to his retirement tour. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying to you is LA Knight's been with the company for quite some time now, and the only title that he has held is the U.S. Championship, which was a while ago when he was feuding with Logan Paul. So, I mean, it's been a while since LA Knight has wore championship gold around his waist. To me, I feel like with the backstage politics, maybe even Triple H, maybe even the powers that be, maybe even Nick Khan for that matter, and the creative team really do not see LA Knight being a top guy for the WWE. And it might be a hot take for a lot of people, and I understand it's probably very subjective. But you got to understand the landscape of where WWE is going right now after what we just went through at SummerSlam, and the fact of what Obafemi even just said, the conversation that he had with Braun Breaker, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. We're getting into this new generation where you're going to start slowly seeing these uprising of superstars making a huge wave in the main event scene for WWE, being Obafemi, Braun Breaker, Sol Ruca, names that, you know, are still young in the game but are on the up and up, especially guys like Femi and Braun Breaker. LA Knight is a guy that's, I think, damn near close to 50. I think he's 48 years old, if I'm not mistaken. And you look at someone like Roman Reigns, and look, I respect the hell out of Roman. Don't get me wrong. Do I see Roman Reigns putting over a guy like LA Knight? No, I do not. Roman is in business for himself, and he's the guy. I mean, without Roman Reigns, WWE, I'm not going to say that they're in deep shit, but they're going to be hurting, especially the name of Roman Reigns and how many fans are gravitated towards a guy like Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns is not going to put a guy over that's almost 49 years old to make him the next big thing. I think that moment is saved between Roman Reigns and Obafemi going into next year's WrestleMania, where Roman also puts over Obafemi and Obafemi becomes a new World Heavyweight Champion. I don't see that with LA Knight. Now, some people can say, well, LA Knight should be champion. Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you guys on that. The problem is one, how do we get there? Is Roman actually going to put over LA Knight? And how much is it going to mean to those diehard LA Knight fans if he wins the title and only holds it for 4 weeks? And are there going to be the diehard LA Knight fans at the floodgates of WWE pissed off to the moon with Triple H that he only had 4 weeks with a title reign? Which, not for nothing, is a lot better than Sami Zayn's 9-day title reign. I'll give him that. I feel like they're backs against the wall with LA Knight. I really do. I think LA Knight has put himself over. The fans are gravitated towards LA Knight. I think LA Knight completely destroyed Roman Reigns with a microphone last night. He did a hell of a job and carried himself very well in that back and forth segment that he had with Roman. It's just, I don't know if they're going to put a lot of faith in someone like LA Knight. I really don't. And I don't know why. I don't know what the hell the holdup is. I don't know if it's something where they see this guy, yeah, sometimes he's in the main event scene, sometimes he's mid-card at best. He might be WWE's best mid-carder of all time. But I don't know if they see LA Knight as a guy that's going to carry this company on his back, to be honest with you. Might be a hot take, like I said, very subjective for those diehard LA Knight fans. But, I mean, you had to ask the question to yourself, when is it going to be time for this guy to wear championship gold? And do we see something on the lines where Roman Reigns is going to actually give the belt away to LA Knight? Now, for me personally, I would love to see it, because I think WWE Monday Night Raw needs a shakeup, especially going into Survivor Series, because right now, the way Survivor Series is starting to slowly shape up and shape out, it's basically going to be Roman and his team against the babyfaces that we've seen take on the Usos and Jacob Fatu. I mean, Royce, LA Knight, Solo Sikoa, just to name a couple. It might be a 4-on-4 matchup, maybe 5-on-5, who knows, but that, to me, is where we're going into War Games and Survivor Series in November. So, could they shake something up and have LA Knight be champion going into Survivor Series? I don't know. I mean, the way things are slowly shaping out, if this match is going to go down between LA Knight and Roman Reigns, most likely this is not going to be taking place until we get into October, which is another 2 months from now until we get the Money in the Bank in New Orleans. That's a 2-month build that we have from now and September until we get to Money in the Bank between LA Knight and Roman Reigns. 2 months can be a long time. Now, again, I don't know if WWE is going to bring in another pay-per-view or PLE going into September, maybe WrestlePalooza, and we have this matchup between Roman and LA Knight at WrestlePalooza. I'm not sure. It's not yet announced, but if not, then most likely it's going to be 2 months going into Money in the Bank where we're going to have this matchup here between Roman and LA Knight for the World Heavyweight Championship. I do not see Roman dropping this title until we get to WrestleMania. I just don't see it. I don't. Because right now, just like Obafemi, Roman Reigns is printing money for this company. They see him as a top guy, and he is a top guy. And maybe that the thing of it is that maybe LA Knight is not in the same even ballpark as Roman Reigns. He's on the outside looking in. At 47, 48 years old, I don't know. And it's a problem because LA Knight's been around with the company for quite some time now, and they yet to pull the trigger on this guy. I mean, hell, LA Knight, like I said earlier, can probably go down as WWE's best mid-carder of all time, to be honest with you. And I've been crucial with LA Knight. I've been stating it for weeks to a point where it's like trying to get blood from a stone, bro, that LA Knight needs to get the hell away from the bloodline. I feel as if without the bloodline, creatively, WWE doesn't have a vision for LA Knight. I mean, I feel like LA Knight needs the bloodline like people need oxygen. And without the bloodline, LA Knight's back in catering, not doing jack shit. And I still have my standpoint. I still stand on that. I feel like without them, there is no LA Knight. He is attached to the hip with them because at the end of the day, say what you want about LA Knight, but he's not an idiot. If he can stay attached to one of the biggest draws right now on Monday Night Raw, then why the hell not? Because you know damn well, because if you're attached to the biggest thing going on Monday Night Raw, that you know that you're going to be used week in and week out because you're attached to the bloodline. It's doing the same thing now for Solo. We're starting to do the same thing now for Royce Keys. We saw Royce Keys in the main event last night taking on Jacob Fatu. We also saw LA Knight start the show with Roman Reigns. So again, it's keeping these guys on television. It's keeping these guys relevant. You know what I mean? I think for LA Knight, if he becomes world champion even for a month, I don't see how bad that could be. It's a tip of the cap for him. He can say, hey, I became world heavyweight champion even though it was for a month. And that's it. Even if LA Knight were to beat Roman Reigns, I don't even see him having this long, elaborate title reign that people might think that he's going to have. It could be for a month. It could be for, maybe a month and a half, and that's it. He can win the belt now and might not be able to hold it once we get to Survivor Series. But I like the idea of LA Knight becoming world champion only due to the fact that it shakes some shit up on Monday Night Raw and it rattles the cage of the bloodline. It pisses them off. Most notably, it pisses off Roman Reigns. The problem is WWE actually going to solidify this idea and make it come to fruition? I honestly doubt it. Because WWE and Triple H are known to play it safe, and right now the safe hand is Roman Reigns. They don't want to jeopardize that. Not with these pay-per-views and everything else like that. Especially TKO. They don't want to risk that shit either because it's money. For as far as I'm concerned, TKO just lost $60 million when they did the UFC event over at the White House. $60 million they lost. They had to eat that. $60 million. So right now, again, we're talking about a company with TKO that are literally trying to just line their pockets with cash. And right now, Roman Reigns, say what you want about the guy, he's printing money for WWE. Same thing with Obafemi. They're printing money for WWE. So with LA Knight, I don't know if they're ever going to pull the trigger on this guy. And honestly, for what it's worth, they might not ever pull the trigger on someone like LA Knight. I told you guys this before, and I stand on business with this. Every year after WrestleMania, there's always budget cuts and releases after every WrestleMania. They usually call it Black Friday or whatever the hell they call it. And it's usually the SmackDown after WrestleMania. And we always get these releases and everything else like that, or restructure contracts that don't go through, or they don't want to re-sign their contracts, and we get these releases. I can see LA Knight possibly being on that docket and that paper for a release, because WWE seemingly might not have a plan for LA Knight going into WrestleMania. You know what I mean? And maybe, for what it's worth, LA Knight, like I said, can't be a stupid guy. He has to see, at some point, the writing on the wall. Are they actually going to push me to the main event scene and make me world champion, or I'm always going to play second fiddle to guys like Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins and, so all these other top guys in the company? Yeah, you probably are, bro. And the saddest thing is LA Knight is immensely over with the fan base. He made a huge name for himself. He's immensely over. One of the biggest baby faces in the company. The fact of the matter is that Triple H and the creative team just do not want to invest in someone that is 47, 48 years old in LA Knight. I also think that there are backstage politics. It could be Triple H, it could be the creative team itself, that don't have a lot of faith nor believe in someone like LA Knight. You heard Triple H say at the post media scrum after SummerSlam, saying that there's stars that want to get over, but they're no CM Punk, they're no Roman Reigns, they're no, Obafemi. Well, you're not giving these other superstars the opportunities to make themselves into stars like a Roman Reigns, because you're stifling the shit out of them. On both sides of the fence, whether it's the men's locker room or the women's locker room, you're not making bigger stars because Triple H and the creative team are so petrified to make another star right now because they don't want to risk losing money. And right now, like I said, at the end of the day, they are printing money with guys like Obafemi and Roman Reigns. Two of the top draws right now, especially on Monday Night Raw. Guys like CM Punk, Cody Rhodes. They don't want to risk jeopardizing these guys or pissing these people off because it puts Raw or SmackDown at a downslope. They lose more money. They lose more ticket sales. They lose more revenue on pay-per-views and PLEs. They don't want to risk it. Triple H wants to play it safe, and that's exactly what he's going to be doing. So for those people out there saying, oh, this could be LA Knight's time for him to win the championship, I would not hold your breath, bro. To be honest with you, I had to see it to believe it. I would not hold your breath because you can't convince me that they have been pushing LA Knight to the moon and back. It's not like they strapped a rocket ship to this guy back and said, you know what, we're going to go with you like they did with Jey Uso. No. That's not been the case for LA Knight. Why? Because maybe Triple H and the creative team don't believe in someone like LA Knight. But we'll see what happens. Maybe this match will take place at Money in the Bank, or if they decide to announce WrestlePalooza for the month of September. And we'll see how that plays out. The other thing I want to talk about as well is Liv Morgan. Now, I told you guys after SummerSlam that I wasn't too keen on the decision with Liv Morgan beating Io Sky for abundance of reasons. Number one, the main reason was her title reign. Over 100 days, no defenses, not doing shit with the title, and her title reign is going to go down as an absolute fucking joke. So when she beat Io Sky at SummerSlam, I said, well, here we go again with this shit, and she's going to hold the belt for another 100 days with no challengers. And I told you guys when I did my SummerSlam review that I'm hoping that we do get the return of Stephanie Vaquer, or maybe the return of Becky Lynch, and that's exactly what happened on Raw last night. We saw the return not only of Becky Lynch, but we saw the return finally of Stephanie Vaquer after she was dealing with multiple visa issues that was preventing her to get back on Monday Night Raw. So now that we see Stephanie Vaquer and Becky Lynch back, Becky has her sights set on the world title, and obviously Stephanie Vaquer wants her rematch with Liv Morgan for the women's world title. So it looks like Liv Morgan's not going to have the luxury to be sitting on her ass for 100 days and not defend that title. So I'm happy about that. I'm happy that Becky is back. I'm happy that Stephanie Vaquer finally fixed her visa issues. Now she's back on Monday Night Raw, and now we can start getting back to business where Liv Morgan is going to defend that women's world title against top contenders like Becky Lynch and Stephanie Vaquer. So I'm excited for that. I think Raquel Rodriguez, I could put Io Sky in the mix of that, maybe, Roxanne Perez. There's a lot of different variables that go into that as well for Raquel Rodriguez, but as far as Liv Morgan, I'm excited that we got the return of Becky Lynch and also the return of Stephanie Vaquer, and it looks like both Becky and Stephanie have their sights set on the women's world title. The other thing I want to talk about, too, before I get the hell up out of here is Oba Femi. I praised Oba. I think Oba is the guy that's going to be carrying this company for the next 10, 15 years. Oba is the guy. Whether people like Oba or not, and there's not a lot of people out here that don't like Oba, but whether you like the guy or not, this is the guy that's going to be the next big thing for WWE for the next 10, 15 years. You saw SummerSlam with Brock seemingly passing the torch to Oba, Brock telling the fans, well, I was the past, here's the future, and that Oba is the real deal. And honestly, for what it's worth, Oba Femi is the real deal. The way he carries himself, the way that he wrestles, the way that he's built, man. This guy's built like a brick shithouse, man. He's 6'3", 303 pounds, built like a brick shithouse, man. And to be honest with you, to me, this will be something where Roman would be dropping the title to a guy like Oba Femi going into WrestleMania, 100%. I think Oba, he paid respects to Lesnar. He said that, the Beast can finally lay to rest and finally take a break and ride off into the sunset. And, the fact that both these guys respected each other, the fact that Brock saw something in Oba, wanted to give back not only to another superstar, but give back to the company and put someone over, and he did a great job with putting over Oba Femi. So I got to give Brock credit on that. And, then we had the stare down between Breakker and Oba Femi. Now, this got me excited because, first and foremost, Breakker is a top guy. Whether people like it or not, Breakker is a top guy. I think the issue right now for Braun Breakker, and I think a lot of you guys can agree with me on this, is that Breakker needs to somehow, some way, find a way to separate himself from the Vision's bullshit. Breakker needs to be on his own, away from Theory, away from Logan Paul, Maxine, the return of Bronson Reed. Braun Breakker needs to be on his own. He needs to have his own singles run and make him a top guy on Monday Night Raw. And I think we got a little bit of a hint of that with last night's Monday Night Raw when we had the stare down between Oba and Braun Breakker. You can tell Breakker was pissed off with the comments that Oba Femi made. The fact that Oba wants to be the new guy that's carrying this new generation into WWE, and Breakker feels like it should be him filling in that slot and not Oba Femi. I'm all for an Oba Femi Braun Breakker match, 100%. When will we get that? Who knows? But I'm all for it. These two guys are the future of this business without a shadow of a doubt. Breakker, my thing with Breakker is I think Breakker, if we're comparing Oba Femi to Braun Breakker, number one, Breakker hasn't got the same opportunities as Oba. Oba got into a real deal storyline, a serious matchup with the return of Brock Lesnar that really put Oba on the map in the main event scene. Breakker hasn't had that opportunity yet to face off against a top main event guy as of right now. He's not facing off against, we had CM Punk, and we saw how that went down, and or Seth Rollins for that matter. And, I'm not going to say it stifled Braun Breakker, but I think with him still staying in the Vision, it did kind of stifle Breakker as far as him, being singled out as a single superstar and not a part of a stable, nor a part of a tag team with Austin Theory. I think it doesn't do anything for Braun Breaker at all. And to me, that stable with division has been cursed since day one. The injuries, Paul Heyman pretty much dipped out. And right now, Paul Heyman, and that's the other interesting thing how this is going to play out, is Paul Heyman, there was an interaction last night backstage between Braun Breaker and Paul Heyman where Breaker approached Heyman and said, hey, where's Obafemi? And Heyman says, well, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. And then Breaker looks at Paul Heyman and says, well, I figured you knew where he was because you guys are best pals now, right? And then Breaker walks off, and then you can see Paul Heyman frustrated and pissed off. Now, does Breaker realign himself with Paul Heyman and vice versa? And Heyman's, the new, advocate for Braun Breaker? I don't know. I have no idea. Hell, does Paul Heyman work with Obafemi? Who knows? But Paul Heyman right now is on an island all by himself because Brock Lesnar is no longer with the company. He officially retired when he was on the Pat McAfee show and said that he was done, that his body's wore out. He had 25 years in the business, all his accolades and everything else, and now he wants to ride off in the sunset, and that's fine. But now it begs the question: what's next for Paul Heyman? Paul Heyman's still a top guy in this business, one of the best managers in this business. So again, I do beg the question: what's next for Paul Heyman? Does Paul Heyman realign himself with the Vision? Does he realign himself with Braun Breaker? Does he try to make Braun Breaker the next big thing in WWE? We don't know. What we do know is that Obafemi is he's the guy. He put the locker room on notice. He let them all know that he is the ruler and that he's here. If you have a problem, you have to go through Obafemi. So it does beg the question, what's next for someone like Braun Breaker? What's next for Obafemi? Now that Obafemi's done with Brock Lesnar, what's next? You know what I mean? That's also the million-dollar question for both these guys. What's next? But all in all, man, I thought Raw actually was a really solid show. We got the returns of Becky Lynch. We got the return of Stephanie Vaquer finally. We have some matches lined up for Liv Morgan, so she's not just sitting on her ass doing nothing for 100 days without any title defenses. We saw Chad Gable. Gable had a good segment on Raw last night, praising the SummerSlam matchup that he had with Penta. So we saw Gable and Penta as well. We saw Stephanie Vaquer, Becky Lynch. We also saw the return of Big Cass. Now, that's another thing, too. All these vignettes for Big Cass, none of these vignettes had anything or shown anything of Enzo Amore. So this could be something where Big Cass is on his own. He's his own single superstar back on Monday Night Raw, and that's what we're going to do here. My issue with Big Cass is depending on how the situation goes creatively for Big Cass, this could be something where he's also going to be lost in the sauce. Depending on how things go. We saw him attack Javon Evans. Evans is obviously in the talks for the Intercontinental Championship. But like I said, my question is where do we put Big Cass? Because at the end of the day, we've seen a lot of AEW talent jump from AEW and gone over to WWE. And some of it's worked out for some it hasn't. You look at someone like Ricky Starks or Ricky Saints, not really doing a whole hell of a lot. Jay Cargill really ain't doing a whole hell of a lot. Her title reign was awful. It only benefits a certain amount of people. I mean, Powerhouse Hobbs is slowly starting to come into his own. But I do worry about someone like Big Cass and where we put him on the card. Where does he fit in? Storylines for him that make sense. Especially with the writing team right now that's on Monday Night Raw and SmackDown, or just WWE for that matter. Where do we slot in someone like Big Cass? That makes sense. You know what I mean? Because sometimes the grass is not always greener on the other side. And if you watch Raw and SmackDown and see some of these AEW talents go over, you can say that, yeah, maybe they should have stayed where they're at. You know what I mean? I'm not advocating for Big Cass to be miserable or anything else like that. It's just where do we put him on the main roster for Raw? That's the biggest thing. We saw him attack Javon Evans. Okay, well, what's next? His mission statement was that he was back in WWE because he wanted to stack bodies. Okay. Is that by you doing stacking the bodies, or is that making you want to be a number one contender for a world championship? We'll see how that plays out for Big Cass. But like I said, man, at the end of the day, it wasn't a horrible show. I thought it was a decent show at best. We got the returns of Becky Lynch. Stephanie Vaquer is back. And we finally have some competitors to face off against Liv Morgan. Thank God. I thought the opening of the show was great between Roman Reigns and LA Knight. And it seems like LA Knight is shooting his shot. And LA Knight wants the World Heavyweight title. So hopefully we'll see how this plays out. And maybe, just maybe, WWE will finally do the right thing and pull the trigger and crown the so-called uncrowned champion LA Knight to become the new World Heavyweight Champion. We'll see how it plays out, man, but I'm not holding my breath. And again, it all depends on WWE and Roman Reigns if they actually want to put over someone like LA Knight to become World Heavyweight Champion. I'm not against it. To be honest with you, even if LA Knight won the world title, even if he held it for a month, I think at least that would shake some shit up on Monday Night Raw, and it would definitely rattle the cage of the bloodline. So again, I'm not against LA Knight becoming World Heavyweight Champion. I just don't have a lot of faith in the creative team in Triple H pulling the trigger and crowning the so-called uncrowned champion in LA Knight to finally be the World Heavyweight Champion. But with that being said, though, this is my review of Monday Night Raw. I hope you guys are out there staying safe, be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.